This video is brought to you by Incogni. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they're providing to the entire Upper Echelon community. Alright, today's video is a complete rundown of the Nintendo lawsuit against Pocket Pair, the developers of Palworld, as well as an opinion piece on why they're probably going to win said lawsuit, and what the future of Palworld looks like afterwards if they do. I'll start with context. Palworld, originally announced in June of 2021, is basically a Pokemon ripoff with extra features. I know certain fans of the game will disagree with that characterization adamantly. Please don't click away from the video in rage. That's fine. But the mechanisms in play here are extremely similar. The in-game NPCs are often similar as well, and anyone with a reasonable perspective on the matter can see that while the outcome is currently uncertain, it was abundantly obvious that Nintendo was always going to look at this game with extreme scrutiny. Well, that level of scrutiny can go up or down based on relative success, and Palworld, after its eventual release, went parabolic. It peaked at over 2 million concurrent players on Steam alone, sold tens of millions of copies so far, and is even teaming up with Sony to, quote, as per their joint press release, expand and develop new businesses associated with the hit game, end quote. That's no small thing, by the way, and just to put this all in perspective, Pokemon itself is the third best-selling video game franchise ever, and more specifically Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is one of the best-selling solo-standing Pokemon games in the series, sold 6.5 million copies in its very first week, as well as, per Nintendo's own fiscal year 2022 financials, sold about 12.6 million copies in the first 2 months. Actually, just to once again add a little bit more perspective here, Arceus is quite possibly the most successful standalone Pokemon game ever, because it's not grouped together with multiple paired versions. Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield, for two examples here, are separate versions of the same game, where global sales figures are reflective of the total combined number, and there's a bunch of exclusive Pokemon for each different version, incentivizing double purchases. Obviously, in a lot of these cases, one of the paired versions will outsell the other, but combining them shows just how well Pokemon Arceus really did when compared to the rest of the franchise. Well, stack that up against Palworld and we can see the true scope of the problem for Nintendo, because Palworld substantially outsold Arceus in its first week with 8 million copies and continued that trajectory well afterwards, amassing 25 million copies sold across platforms by February 22nd, which is twice the number of copies sold by Arceus in half as much time. All of this to simply say that Palworld isn't just a successful video game, it's a more successful video game when compared to practically any singular Pokemon entry ever, with budding partnerships with Sony, which is high profile as well, and massive prospects for the future. Obviously, that was going to draw a ton of scrutiny, which it did, and in January of 2024, shortly after the game's initial release, the Pokemon Company released a statement of their own that said, quote, "We have received many inquiries regarding another company's game released in January 2024. We have not granted any permission for the use of Pokemon intellectual property or assets in that game. We intend to investigate and take appropriate measures to address any acts that infringe on intellectual property rights related to the Pokemon," end quote. Shortly after this happened, speculation ran wild on social media about whether or not there was anything that they could do about it. But in September, very recently as of the making of this video, Nintendo came out with another statement acknowledging a patent infringement lawsuit against Pocket Pair, the developers of Palworld, seeking compensation for damages. This is where things get interesting, and this is where I'll be mixing in historical examples and personal opinion under a general premise that this is likely a winning strategy for Nintendo that will not result in the removal or deletion of Palworld in any capacity, simply money changing hands behind the scenes, with everything else continuing on relatively as normal. Before going further, today's video is made possible by Incogni, which is an online privacy and data protection service. Data is the new gold. Some people use it for marketing, others use it for cybercrime, unfortunately. But your data and your personal information is an extremely sought-after digital commodity now that is consistently trading hands online each and every day. That's where Incogni comes into play. Your personal information is everywhere, not just in the archives of companies you know about or gave permission to, but other data firms and big tech companies as well, who then sell it all across the internet. For everyday users, it's effectively an impossible task to stop any of that because there are hundreds of these data brokers, and it's an insurmountable obstacle to contact them, fight objections, and get anything actually removed. However, Incogni does all of this for you quickly and easily. I've used it myself, it works, I've seen the results, and therefore I can genuinely recommend it to the audience. The process is relatively simple. Sign up for the website, give them specific legal permission to work on your behalf, and then let them know the information that they'll be having removed. After that, sit back and just let them work. Aggregation of the service lets them streamline the process because most people as individuals can't really do anything and don't have the time or ability to make a difference. Using the link down below in the description and code Echelon at checkout, you'll get 60% off an annual subscription to Incogni. Again, link down below and special promo code Echelon for 60% off your subscription. Big thank you to Incogni for sponsoring the channel. All right, back on task. First things first, we don't actually know what particular patents Nintendo is referring to. Not yet, anyway. Eventually we will, but the prevailing assumption is that it's this one right here, which pertains to the battle mechanic of catching creatures out in the field with a ball. The interesting thing, though, is that this patent isn't valid in the United States, at least not yet. However, it is valid in Japan as of 2023, while Nintendo is suing them in Tokyo court, and it was filed for in 2021. Previously, Pokemon games required players to engage in an actual battle before catching something, but with Arceus and Pokemon Go, I think, you could just sneak up and try to catch them by throwing a ball out in the open world, which is the mechanic that Nintendo successfully applied for and eventually patented in 2023. Here's the crazy part. Palworld got announced and showcased before Nintendo even filed that patent, but the initial Palworld trailer didn't show anything even remotely similar to the Pokeball capture mechanic. A lot of people right now are attempting to defend one side or the other, but the truth of the matter is we really just don't know. Nintendo has a very substantial corporate intelligence apparatus, to be sure, even so far as to surveil and monitor hackers or modders in their own homes, eventually sending private security and detectives to their doors. There's a whole saga with leaked security documents called the Nintendo Ninjas leak, which outlines some of the crazier alleged practices. But regardless, the point here is to say that we really have no idea what Nintendo did or didn't know at the time when filing this patent. Still, what they may or may not have known is less relevant when you consider the fact that they've done pretty much exactly the same thing before, and they won. In January of 2018, Nintendo announced a patent infringement lawsuit against mobile developer Probable Incorporated, later revealing 6 different patents involved, some of which contain very, very similar types of mechanical ownership. One example would be grouping objects together on a touchscreen in a certain way with a pen, and then dragging those objects around for various interactions, like attacking patterns. But the ultimate outcome was a $30 million victory, 3.3 billion yen at the time, in favor of Nintendo. Tactically speaking, they progressively dialed up the damages claim over time from $42 million to $47 million, eventually almost $100 million claimed, until Colopal decided to bite the bullet and settle back down at $30 million, which included a future licensing agreement, and that's where I believe the connection is. Because like it or not, Nintendo does currently hold a patent over the mechanic of throwing a ball and capturing a creature in an open world. Palworld is currently using that mechanic in a game that is wildly successful, and if historical precedent is any indication, Nintendo will now leverage that fact to extract a large settlement and license that gameplay function back out to them for the future. Obviously, there's a ton of alternate possibilities right now, like they switch the mechanic completely, or it's the wrong patent in the first place that we're all speculating about. But in my opinion, the most likely outcome is that Nintendo gets money, Pocket Pair continues developing Palworld, and the gaming community moves on rather quickly. Because I don't think this is about killing competition. I think this is just about extracting revenue from a hyper-successful rival. To be clear, I don't think this is a good thing, not in the slightest, because the idea of patenting general game mechanics and then weaponizing that against competitors very much seems like it can only ever have a chilling effect on creativity and innovation. But I also find it hard to see how this one ends up any differently than it did a few years ago, against Colopal. It's really interesting to see both sides get so personally invested for this one. On the one hand, people are defending Nintendo's decision by claiming that it's downright theft and they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. Some of them even rejoicing about the potential demise of Palworld completely, which seems kind of ridiculous. But on the other, critics of Nintendo are showcasing other games that have general sort of capture mechanics inside them, with captions like, quote, "Wonder if Nintendo is going to sue Microsoft for World of Warcraft's Battle Pet Catching System 2, maybe if they were an indie dev," end quote, when the mechanics being shown are holistically different when compared to the very precisely patented battle capture, ball-throwing mechanic that Nintendo appears to be focusing on. To be completely honest, I don't know where it all ends up, but Pocket Pair has more than enough money to fight all this, or settle if they wanted to, or reformat certain mechanics if that's the direction they want to go. And I don't see any realistic version of this winding up as anything other than a large sum of money simply changing hands. Nintendo is making it known who's boss. They're asserting dominance over a market that Pocket Pair has made an astoundingly rapid invasion of, but they don't have the ability to destroy the game completely. At least I don't think so. So they've resorted to extremely specific technical ownership of patent rights in an effort to bring in revenue however possible. I wouldn't claim to know how much that particular mechanic is really worth in this case. It's not like the game would cease to exist without it in any sense of the word, and they would have to pretty avidly defend any high millions figure that they assign to it in Japanese court. But I don't necessarily think that big bad Nintendo is trying to stamp out its competition. I more so look at this and see a jealous Nintendo trying to scratch at Pocket Pair and make it known that they're still the most popular kid in school and this portion of the sandbox is theirs. So you have to ask before you play in that part of the sandbox. That's the vibe I get. In the end, no one can say for sure, and it might take 5 or 6 years for us to even find out anything, but Nintendo is suing Pocket Pair for patent infringement, not copyright, with an army of fans on either side passionately defending their favorites and denouncing the opposition as horrible, evil people that either steal without shame or try to kill innocent indie developers, neither of which, in my opinion, appears to be true in the slightest. That's it. That is the Nintendo lawsuit against Pocket Pair, or Palworld, explained as best I can, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to support the channel, there's links down below, locals and Patreon, monthly memberships, the video sponsor, of course, Incogni, merchandise, social media, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.